I'm going to share 20 producer lessons I wish I knew sooner. I've been producing music for over 16 years, and in the past decade, I've been fortunate to have built a successful career doing a lot of different things as a producer, writer, and artist, ranging from producing other artists to making music for television, to building my own artist catalog and growing this channel to over 15 million views. So here we go. Number 1, a subpar instrumental production can actually get saved by a killer vocal production. The reality is that if you make vocal music, then the vocals are the most important thing in the track. And if you have insanely good vocals, then that can actually make up for subpar instrumentals. Now, what I don't want you hearing me say is that you should make crappy instrumentals, but the reason I bring this up is because when you're working on vocal music, the vocals can really take a song from okay to amazing if the vocals are done at a really high level. This matters a lot because when you make vocal-based music, the audience is paying closest attention to the vocals. So if the vocals are just amazing, then that can actually cover up some potential deficiencies in the instrumental production. I also start here because that leads me right into number 2, which is that subpar vocal production can destroy a killer instrumental production. No matter how good your instrumental is, if you fail to get amazing vocal production, it's going to pull the entire thing down. Great vocals can pull a song up, but poor vocals can also completely pull it down in the opposite direction. And this is not just one thing that we're talking about. We're talking about the performance of the vocal, we're talking about vocal quality, recording quality, mix quality, the whole thing. If you record subpar performances, then it doesn't matter how good your vocal mix is. It's not gonna work. It'll be a problem. But if you get great performance and the mix sounds like crap, it's kind of the same. It's just not gonna work. You need to make sure that you're producing killer vocals in every single way, from the performance to the level that you're recording at to the mix with compression, EQ, and spatial effects like reverb and delay. Like I said, if you make vocal music, then the vocals are the priority, so you have to nail it, or you can find yourself with a crazy good track that is completely ruined. Prioritize amazing performances and record them at a really high level and then nail that vocal mix. All right, number 3 of lessons I wish I knew when I got started is that layering sounds isn't just about stacking sounds, it's about texture. Producers love to talk about layering, and to be honest with you, I love it too, but I think there's a huge misconception that adding layers is just about stacking stuff to make it bigger or something, when in reality, layering sounds has a lot more to do with texture and sonic complexity. So when I layer 2 instruments together, my primary goal is either making the original sound more complex or creating something that feels more textural in the production that essentially takes 2 or more sounds and makes it sound like a single thing that is 100% unique. If you're layering sounds and only thinking about making it sound bigger, then you're actually missing out on how much texture and sonic uniqueness you can create if your approach is more oriented around that rather than just making big stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I love making things big too, but my primary goal with layering is about designing the sonic world that that song exists in. I'm thinking about the timbre, the transient, the sustain, the release, the entire vibe of every layer and how those layers interact with each other that I'm blending in. You know, sometimes I need a sound to cut through a little bit more, so I'm gonna go find a layer that has a better transient to help out in the cut. Or maybe I need the sustain of the sound to have a bit more depth or uniqueness, so I'm gonna find a sound that adds more meat to the sound to create something more unique. Don't oversimplify layering as just adding 2 things together when you can really completely shape a whole sonic universe of the song with smart layering. Real quick, I want to let you know that we are running our 5-day music producer challenge, which is starting next week. So if you want to join that challenge and also watch me and my partner Andrew Barr each produce a song 100% from scratch, from start to finish to final master, then you can sign up now and save your seat with the link below or right up here. If you're watching this after the event is already over, don't worry, you can sign up to get notified when we run the next challenge, which we are starting to do much more regularly throughout the year. Number 4, before you buy effects plugins, you should always prioritize high quality sound libraries. It pains me when I see amateur producers spending a lot of money on plugins like EQs and compressors when they don't own a lot of sound libraries. Friends, sound libraries will get you infinitely more mileage in your music than 10 effects plugins ever will. Because most sound libraries also already have effects plugins built into them. You need more compression, EQ, saturation, etc., then you can almost always accomplish that within the libraries themselves without ever having to own specific plugins to do it. And moreover, sound libraries today already are baked in with effects. In other words, you don't need to go compress most of these sounds because they're already compressed. So if you compress them again, it should really be for something specific you're going for, not necessarily that the sound needs compression. Now, I'm not saying don't buy effects plugins. plugins, but if you don't have killer sounds, then you're honestly just throwing your money away, because you can't just magically make average sounds incredible by slapping on an EQ. But if you have killer sounds to start with, you won't need to add tons of plugins in the first place. So start with amazing source material first, and then go invest in some of those effects plugins. Number 5, achieving pro sounding mixes starts by having pro sounding productions. We see this all the time with our students, where they come in asking us to help make their mixes better, but their productions are filled with problems that are going to make mixing a total nightmare, and frankly, they make it so achieving a professional sound is almost impossible. If your rough mixes before mixing don't sound amazing, then you aren't ready to mix. Plain and simple. So you have to ask yourself, do my rough mixes before I ever mix, do they already sound incredible? Could I show that to the average person and they would say, wow, that sounds great? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't be finished with the producing stage. You definitely shouldn't be moving on to the mix phase. This is also why I said that sound libraries are more important than effects plugins, because music is sound. And if the sounds aren't amazing, then you're pretty much going to be forever stuck in amateur hell, as we call it. Your productions should already sound amazing before you ever mix. And my philosophy as a producer is to produce as if mixing doesn't exist. You're gonna get much better results that way. So when you approach making music this way, it means they're gonna be more intentional about the sound choice, you're gonna be more intentional about arrangement, and about every aspect of your production, rather than having a fix it in the mix mindset. If you find yourself thinking, I'll fix that in the mix, frankly, you're starting from a really bad spot. Shame on you, don't do that. When you realize that getting high quality sound is totally possible before you mix, you're gonna be amazed at how much easier mixing is and how much better the quality will be. Never forget, garbage in equals garbage out. If you're starting with garbage sounds, you're gonna end up with a garbage sounding mix. So stop making garbage and start making great sounding music with a start, with better sounds, better performances, better recordings, and better arrangements, all of which can be done without effects plugins. Number 6, you can create pro sounding mixes with only 4 plugins: EQ, compression, reverb, and delay. Stop thinking that you need these crazy flashy and shiny plugins to get great sounding mixes. Trust me, if you're on social media, you know what I'm talking about. You're seeing ads plastered everywhere. Like, if you don't have this plugin, you're not gonna be getting cool mixes or whatever. It's just ridiculous. If you have a great sounding production like we just talked about, then these are the 4 plugins that you should learn to master first, and then worry about the weird stuff later. I'm not saying the weird stuff's not cool. It can be kind of cool sometimes. If you have a great understanding of EQ, then you're gonna be able to create extra clarity, tonal balance in your music, which is going to translate across devices and sound great no matter where you are. If you have a great understanding of compression, then you're gonna get your vocals and instrumentals popping a lot more, and especially on vocals, compression is one of the most important tools that you have to learn to get pro sounding vocal mixes. Like, whenever I hear students' music where compression is either used too much or too little, it's very obvious. Now, the good news is that if you understand how compression works, what it does, how to leverage it, this is not rocket science to get good at. And finally, if you master spatial effects like reverb and delay, man, goodness, that's where you can sweeten the pot and make your tracks really come to life. So ask yourself, do you fully leverage these 4 tools to the max, or are you easily pushing to the most sexy plugin while never learning to master EQ, compression, reverb, or delay? Number 7, bus processing can save you literally hours of work. If you have a bunch of guitars or drums or other groupings of instruments, or even an entire instrumental or an entire mix, you can apply bus processing to affect everything rather than individual instruments, and this can honestly be so powerful in saving time and maximizing your workflow. If you feel like your guitars are sounding too dark, for example, you can apply a single EQ to the entire guitar bus to boost the highs or cut down on the low mids, rather than going into every single individual track and applying EQ. A big lesson I learned, especially when I have deadlines to meet, is that working smarter is better than working harder. It does not make sense to go process 10 tracks separately when I can literally get the exact same result with a single move. Now, I'm not saying this always works every single time, but it works a lot more than you might expect. One of my productions I'm working on right now has a full orchestra that we recorded, and I was able to get a lot of the tone that I wanted out of the orchestra with a single plugin on the entire orchestra, rather than going in and individually going into all those layers. Whenever I can do one processing move to make a big difference, I always do that, rather than wasting time processing 10 separate things to get the same result. Again, work smarter, not harder. Number 8, low-end problems typically are a result of too much low end and not too little. If your low end is out of control, it's almost never a result of there not being enough. In fact, way more frequently, amateur producers are overloading their low end, thinking that more stuff in the low end means it's gonna be bigger, when actually it's the exact opposite. Getting killer low end has a lot more to do with clarity than anything else. When you have fewer things existing in the low end, it actually becomes 10 times easier to make what you do have in the low end sound bigger. Like my mama says, less is more. Stop filling your low end with loads of layers. Instead, be selective and protective of that low end to make it sound even bigger. You're welcome. Number 9, an overstuffed arrangement makes mixing 100 times harder, and properly arranged tracks makes mixing 100 times easier. This is very similar to this low end topic we just talked about. Amateur producers see guys like me with 100 tracks on a session and they think, I need to add tons of stuff because Nathan adds tons of stuff. But what they fail to realize is that those 100 tracks I have on my session are all very strategically placed and almost never are sounding all at the same time. I might have 20 tracks out of those 100 that only play a few times the entire song. And if you look at my sessions, you'll notice that you always see a lot of empty space in the DAW where there's breathing room in the song. Smart arrangement is not about loading in a bunch of random crap, but it's instead about strategically adding layers to complement each other or contrast each other to make the song develop. I was recently in Prague learning from some of the greatest film composers in the world at the Composer Summit, and spent some time learning from Conrad Pope, who's John Williams' orchestrator, and he made a great point that our ears can only focus on about 3 things at the same time, and any more than that, it just becomes a big old mess. And this is 100% accurate with arrangement. If you have too many things happening, it's gonna make your mixing a total disaster and a pain. But if you have a smart and strategic arrangement, you'll find that mixing is 100 times easier. Number 10, becoming faster at the technical side of producing is ultimately about making you faster on the creative side. I find that so many producers who are creatively brilliant oftentimes lack the technical side of making music in the DAW, which ends up becoming this massive bottleneck. Now, I know that most of you want to just make better music and be more creative, and I'm right there with you, but you have to understand that the more you are capable with the technical side of making music in the DAW, the faster you're going to be able to get with the creative side. You need to learn your tools. You need to learn your shortcuts, learn how to maximize your workflow so you're not wasting time. My business partner Andrew and I recently hosted a summit in Phoenix with a handful of our students. One of the biggest lessons they walked away with is how essential being technically competent is, because when you're needing to make music fast, especially if you're constantly being slowed down because of technical incompetence, that's a major problem. If you want to be able to focus on making awesome music, then take the time to really learn your DAW, learn your tools. Like I said, learn those 4 plugins, EQ, compression, reverb, and delay. Learn where your sounds are and learn how to maximize your setup to have a faster workflow. There is nothing worse than not being able to get your ideas out because you are too slow with your workflow. Number 11, on that point, dedicated sound exploration is some of the best time spent to make you more efficient. I've gotten this question 100 times from our students asking how to get better at sound choice. And the truth is that you need to actually know what sounds you have to be good at choosing sounds. Think about this. If you need a very specific sound, do you know exactly where to go to find it? Like I do, and professionals all do. So if an artist asks me to find a specific sound, trust me, I know where I'm gonna go to find it because I have spent dedicated time learning what sounds I have, where they are, and how to use them. This will sound funny, but whenever I'm sick, this is when I actually do this. If I don't feel very good, if I have a fever or a flu or whatever, this is when I'm gonna spend maybe 2 hours or so just exploring sounds. I'm gonna dig through the sound libraries that I own that I don't use that often, and then I'm gonna favorite those sounds and catalog them so I know where they are. And this goes back to knowing your tools. If you don't even know what sounds you have in your library, then how do you expect to be able to create efficiently? Take time regularly, especially if you've never done this before, and dedicated time every single week to only learning what sounds you have. Don't worry about making a track. Don't worry about producing anything. Just find sounds, favorite them in the library, and become fluent with what you have so you can easily recall them when you're actually working on new music. Sometimes when I do this as well, it inspires things. I'm digging through sounds and I'll find sounds that are like, oh, that's a really inspirational sound. And I'm gonna save that sound so that way when I work on something in the future, I know, oh, that sound, it kind of got some ideas flowing. And so I'm gonna go back to that sound and see what kind of ideas that gets me rolling with. Like, I still take time to do this even after all of these years. Number 12, use reference tracks from the very beginning, not just for mixing. Everyone's probably heard that referencing is really important for mixing, but the truth is that referencing is important at the beginning. If you're trying to make a specific vibe, then reference those songs before you ever start making that song, and I guarantee you're gonna have a better result. And when I say reference, I don't mean listen to it once and then never listen to it again until the end. I cannot tell you how many times it's like, did you reference? And like, oh yeah, I referenced. It's like, great. Like, how often are you going back and forth? Well, I listen at the beginning and I listen at the end. Guys, the whole point of referencing is that you're consistently going back and forth. You need to consistently go and see, what does that sound like? What does mine sound like? Oh, interesting. This sounds completely different now and I got completely off the rails. Maybe I should try to get back on track. You're gonna learn a lot by doing this because you're gonna start to pick up on things like, wow, my song is way darker, or man, those drums hit way harder in that reference, or there are a lot more vocal layers in that reference than mine. But don't wait till the end to reference. If you're waiting till the end to reference, you've waited too long and all that time has passed you by and you could have been making so many changes throughout. Do it from the very start and do it throughout. I promise it won't let you down. Number 13, automation is one of the most important steps in getting killer mixes. Whenever I show my students how much automation I use, I frequently get a shocked response in the classic, "Oh, you use it that much?" response. Automation is one of those things that I hated for such a long time. I just didn't really want to do it. But when I finally, actually embraced it, it completely changed my mixes. I automate a lot. We're talking volume automation, reverb automation, delay automation, other effects automation, and more. You should be automating to make sure everything is where it needs to be at every single moment. And this can make a massive difference in quality from one mix to another. If you compare automated mixes versus non-automated mixes, it's usually a night and day difference. Just to keep this really short, if you aren't automating, then you're missing out on adding a ton of life to your music. Trust me, do it. Number 14, copy and paste MIDI as little as possible. I see this all the time where MIDI is just copied all over the place. And while this isn't like a deal breaker and it isn't gonna make a massive difference, I do believe that nuance matters in music. And if you're copying crap everywhere, you're losing a lot of nuance. Moreover, I literally just went through a student's track recently where they had copied things down and there were so many unintended consequences of that because they didn't really realize that by copying from one track to another track to layer these two, they were actually ending up with a lot of frequency conflict between those two sounds that if they would have actually played that in, they would have been more likely to actually hear that, you know what, these two things are kind of competing. Maybe I should bump this one up the octave or change the voicing a little bit so they blend together a little bit more. When you're copy pasting, you're almost disconnecting your brain from what you're actually doing, which means you're not really thinking about the intention behind the reason why you're doing something from the beginning. If you have two layers of something, then don't just copy it. Re-perform that part. Or if you do copy that, then really put your ears out and say, okay, are these things actually complementing each other? And maybe adjust the MIDI, whether it's even just adjusting the velocities or changing the notes or changing the pitches. I love technology, I think it's great, but don't forget that we are making music and music should feel alive. And the more you can add detailed nuance, the better. I do think there's a time and place for copying, but use it sparingly, and most importantly, don't be lazy. I think a lot of people do this out of pure laziness. Maybe this is just the musician in me speaking, but we are making music, so make music, don't just copy crap all over the place. That's my soapbox. Number 15 on this point, I know this is controversial, but learn an instrument, and I believe that piano is probably the most useful and practical. We are living in a time where you've probably heard people say producers don't need to learn to play an instrument, and guess what? That is 100% true, but it's also not truthful to say that learning an instrument isn't incredibly useful and important. I can tell you that if I produce a song side by side the person who does not play an instrument, I can pretty much guarantee that what I make is gonna come together much faster and will also way more likely sound truly musical because I am actually a musician. Now, I'm not bashing on producers who don't play an instrument, but let's just cut through the bullcrap and be honest here. Musicians are gonna get better results in music than non-musicians every time. And I know that you've probably seen Rick Rubin say he knows nothing about music, but Rick Rubin is also a complete unicorn, and I'm sorry to say it, but you probably aren't. So if you wanna make better music, you wanna do it faster, you wanna be more efficient, then go learn some piano. I literally built a whole piano course teaching exactly what producers need to know. So if you wanna check it out, you can. It's a link in the description. By the way, I never market this thing ever, so I honestly don't care if you get it or not. I literally made it because it was fun and producers were constantly asking me how to learn piano as a producer, so do what you want to do. Number 16, save room for the biggest part of the song. I can't tell you how many songs I've heard from students where they play all their cards way too soon. It's like, here you go, I have a royal flush, at the very beginning. I want you to let me explain what I mean by this. When you listen to a song, you're basically listening to a story. Now, imagine that I told you the ending of the story in the second chapter of the book. That would be so incredibly lame, and you put the book down and be like, why would I even need to finish the book? You already told me the ending. This is exactly what a lot of producers do. You get so excited about the song that you just give it all away way too soon, and you're not leaving room to actually give your listener the big payoff later in the song. You gotta look at your song and figure out where the big moment is and make sure you save room so that you actually make that moment the big moment and you don't get there too soon. Like I preach intentionality so much that I know my students are probably sick and tired of me saying this word, but be intentional with your music. Don't make choices without a reason. Like, know why you are doing what you are doing. There are so many times when I'm coaching students where I'll be like, why did you do this? And they'll be like, I don't really know. And it's like, that's a problem. Respect your audience and give them something to wait for rather than telling them the ending in the second chorus. Make them wait and then give them that awesome payoff. Trust me, your audience will love it so much more and you'll probably also enjoy your music a lot more. All right, number 17, the best producers know when to remove things for the sake of the song. This happens all the time where I produce my song and then we get to a point where I realize I've overdone it and I need to take things out for the sake of making sure the song feels right. That might be the really cool counter melody I added, or this really sweet chord I threw in there, or maybe those wild vocal effects I added. Like, if you think that pros never take things away that they originally did, then you are mistaken. Being a mature producer actually has a lot to do with knowing how to serve the song and being willing to kill your darlings in some cases. Like, sometimes we do really cool things, but they don't serve the song. My priority as a producer is to always serve the song. And if a choice I made doesn't do that, then I have to be willing to remove it. Like, you should try muting some of those elements and seeing what impact it has to find out if things are truly necessary. And sometimes when you do this, you realize it actually sounds better without that thing. So never be afraid to take things out of the song for the sake of serving the song. Number 18, try producing with mix best processing on, aka produce with a simple mastering chain to hear how it will respond to being limited. Now, this comes with a major warning. Always, always, always check your gain to make sure you are not crushing your song while you do this. Like, if you're redlining, in other words, you're like clipping as you go into the mastering chain, that is not good. It's gonna sound like crap. And you're gonna be like, Nathan told me to do best processing, but it sounds terrible. It's like, yes, because you're doing it wrong. I try to turn everything down pretty far so that way I have plenty of headroom. But while I produce, I'm producing with the God particle on my mix bus so you can hear how things sound with the limiter on. I'm not saying you need to use God particle. There's plenty of other plugins you can use. That's just what I use. I know a lot of producers would strongly disagree with this, so do take it with a grain of salt. But when I started doing this, I really felt like I was able to make better decisions because I was getting a sense of how things actually sound through a limiter. I've been doing this specific technique for probably about 2 years. I really do think it makes the producing experience a lot more enjoyable too, since things are sounding nice and loud rather than feeling like I gotta wait to hear how it sounds loud until I'm done. It's worth a try, but always make sure that you're not hitting the output too loud, because that's a big mistake we see all the time. Number 19, always sleep on your mixes. Never call something done the same day unless you have no choice, because 9 out of 10 times I wake up and I feel differently than I did the day before. Our ears are gonna fatigue pretty quickly, so what sounds good at the end of a very long day making music is always gonna sound different after you've slept and come back the next day and essentially reset your brain. I cannot tell you how many times I come back, I'm totally shocked at how different it sounds the next day. If you know, you know. Sometimes I hate how something sounds at the end of the day, but come back to it the next day and I love it. And sometimes the opposite happens too, where I'm like, this is the best song I've ever made, it sounds so good, and I come back to it the next day and I'm like, what was I thinking? This is terrible, and I feel like I have to start all over. Simply put, don't trust tired ears. It's kind of funny, I actually used to hate waiting. It really drove me just bonkers and nuts. But I've since learned to absolutely love sleeping on things because it provides so much more clarity and it provides a lot more confidence. If something sounds really good the following day, I have a lot more confidence that it actually sounds good. Don't get too excited and make sure you get a good rest before clicking submit or publish. And finally, number 20, make music for your listeners, not other music producers. I do not make the music that I make for you per se, because you are a producer, and ultimately I make music I love for my audience as an artist. When I'm talking about my artist project. If I'm making music for another artist, that's a different story. If you like country music, then you are most likely not in my core audience for my solo project. So why would I try to make music to impress you? I hate seeing producers obsess over making music that will get them respect from other producers when those producers are probably not even in your audience. It's nothing more than trying to get someone to stroke your ego if you're only making music to impress other producers. The truth is that most audiences do not care about all the wizardry that we can do as producers. they just want to listen to a good song. So take a chill, stop worrying about what other producers are going to say, and focus on making great music that you love and your audience loves. I get critiqued all the time because of this channel, yet most of the criticism is just other producers being snobby, and they aren't even interested in the kind of music that I make anyway. So why on earth should I care what they say? Don't go looking for validation just for validation's sake, and I care a lot more about what the average person thinks of my music than what other music producers think, because I'm making music to grow an audience, not just to stroke my ego by having other producers praise my music. Don't ever forget why you make music, because it's a really depressing road to travel if you make it only to get praise from people who probably don't even care about your songs in the first place. I have a playlist right here that goes through all the producing fundamentals that you have to know in order to improve in your own skill set, so go here next.